the people for a moment because I can't do two things at once. Make sure this is all going. People for a moment. There we go. It is working. Okay. Um, Before we let you all in, Kim and I were chatting about how awesome it was that our guest speakers kept showing up week after week, even when it wasn't their week. Like Kim and Tammy, I see them both beside me right now, so that's kind of fun. So it's just been a really fun time to continue to learn with them, from them, even when it wasn't quote unquote their week to be presenting. So if you have been to any of these live Q&As so far, then you know Kim. She has been very active in the chat, which I am so thankful for. Trying to keep up with the chat has been challenging as I'm trying to listen to present. I mean, you guys know the chat's hard to focus on when you're trying to also learn from the presenter and ask questions and all of that stuff. So I've been very thankful, Kim, for not only this week, knowing that you were going to be here, but all the weeks that you've been here throughout this book study. I'm just so excited to officially learn from you, not just from you in the chat. So thank you very much for being here.
It's always a pleasure. Christina, you have brought together such an amazing community. And anytime I get to interact with these folks in this room, and the people on your Facebook group and just the whole community is a great day. So thanks for inviting me to be a part of this.
Absolutely. I'm excited for you all to learn from Kim. She has some great stuff. She's got a couple of slides actually this time around that she's going to share with us to really dial in on some things. So let's jump into our quote unquote quick questions and get those out of the way before we get to the real meaty one, which has been a recurring theme. So I'll just let you know that's coming up is the big question that came up week after week after week, and especially a ton this week was, what does this actually look like in my classroom? And how do I bring it all together with all the other things that I'm being asked to do, whether that's a curriculum textbook, whether that's incorporating number routines or something else that you learn about from somebody else, right? Like how can we use those resources that are out there that we already have, that we're being told to use maybe, and still do these things? So that's the big over the cloud over the head of a lot of people right now, of really, how do I make this work? So that is one of the big things we will be talking about today. First thing is our quick questions. And like always, these aren't so quick, but our first one is, how long is a typical lesson slash BTC task? And is there a lesson and then a task? So some clarifying questions in here today.
Wow, there's like really two really important questions in what you just framed. I'm going to start with the second one in terms of like, when do you do the task? Because the research was really clear that the longer you get into your lesson before you get the kids out at the thinking boards, the less engagement you're going to see. And so in the research, if you look in chapter 6, where it talks about launching the task, it shows that if you launch the task within the first 5 minutes of the lesson, you're going to maximize engagement. And the longer you wait to get the kids out there, the less engaging it's going to be. And there's like a line that just goes quickly down. So you definitely want to get the kids out there at the beginning of your math period, as opposed to teaching a lesson first. In fact, I think it's also really important to remember that when we're putting together thinking lessons, we're sort of inverting when the teaching happens, right? So we want to get the kids out at those boards as quickly as possible. You launch that task in the first 3 to 5 minutes and just tell the kids as little as you need to get them going. And then they get out they get out to the boards, they're working with their thinking partners, just really engaging with the task itself. And then when you bring them back together during that consolidation, That's where your teaching happens. And I have, my air quotes here because it's not a lecture, but that's where you consolidate everything and you take what the kids have been talking about at their boards and showing in their work, and you make sure that everybody really gets the vocabulary and gets the concept, by bringing them all together. But it happens after they've done the thinking rather than ahead of time. So really you want to get them out there as quickly as possible, knowing that during your consolidation, that's when you're going to be teaching by asking a lot of questions and bringing in their thinking. How long does a thinking task take is a really complicated question, because sometimes a thinking task might take 10 minutes if it's maybe a warm up or a simpler task. Sometimes you put together a task that will go for 30 minutes. And so I think it really depends on what your learning objective is, the learning target, the learning goal. It depends on how complex the task is, and even how old your students are. Right, like younger students, I find that they're at the thinking boards sometimes, as little as 5 to 10 minutes. And with my fourth and fifth graders, sometimes I have them at the boards for, 25, 30 minutes. Probably not at the beginning of the year, though, right? When we're first doing tasks, it might be a little bit shorter. Another layer of complexity is if students start losing steam, if you find that they're losing stamina, sometimes you might pull them in a little bit earlier than you had anticipated, just to reignite them and reengage them. So how is that for being totally fuzzy?
I think I think that's one thing hopefully people are taking away throughout the entire book study is there is no preset like it has to do this, then this, and be this long, and you have to say these things. And that's why we kind of keep having all these questions week after week that sound similar but slightly different, right? Um, is because we are so trained in it needs to be laid out for us.
Mhm.
This thing should take this long. We say these things. Um, so making this switch is very difficult, I feel like.
Totally.
And as you were talking, the idea, and here's one of the things I don't know if this is right, but I want to encourage people to be, as you're hearing these things, be thinking about the things you're also hearing and how they jive together. So one of the things that came to mind when Kim was just talking was about flipping the order of how we teach. And I don't know if people who are listening have heard um, the switch away from gradual release. The way we were taught to teach was that I do, you do, um, we do, I do, we do, you do. Which now I'm on the spot getting it mixed up, right? But there is a lot of talk in the last couple of years of switching that to where it's you do or we do, you do, I do, whichever order. But the important part is the other stuff doesn't matter. The important part is the last person to come into play is the teacher. And before it used to be us as the main one, right?
Mhm.
So it doesn't matter if you flip the you and we part. I feel like to me the big idea was let the kids play a little first before we just try to hop in and tell them what to do, which
Mhm.
is hard to do, but that's one of the issues we're struggling with. But again, so tell me, like, there's so many things out there that we're being asked to do and told, oh, we should be doing this and we should be doing this. And when you hear this stuff about BTC, don't think of it as another thing. Think of it as how does it jive with the things you've already got, which is one of the things we will be talking about. But go ahead, Ken. I'm talking too much.
No, you're doing great. I want to add a story because I think that this is relevant at this point in time, is that I happen to be national board certified in early adolescent mathematics. And I did my renewals in fifth grade. And so 10 years ago, when I was doing my renewal, I did this inquiry lesson that went great. Right. I was so pleased with how when I had like the big whiteboards, I didn't know about BTC yet. I had big whiteboards that were flat on the tables. And I had my kids in groups of four, and everyone had their own marker. And when I got up I like was so polished. And I talked about the strategies they could use and how they could engage in problem solving. And I didn't give them any answers. I told them how broad their thinking could be. And I talked for 20 minutes. And then I had them do some silent thinking time. And then I had them get on their big boards and work on their boards with their teams. And you know what they did? They split their boards into 4 sections and everybody did their own work. And I went from table to table asking questions and eliciting their conversations. And I looked great. I was the rock star of that video, right? But I talked for 20 minutes. And although at the time I thought the engagement was phenomenal, I didn't know what my teaching was going to look like 10 years later. So fast forward 10 years, this was just in 2023, I decided I'm going to do the same exact lesson, same exact grade level, same demographic of student, same time of year. It was the last week of school because that's kind of how I roll sometimes. And I decided to do this using all the BTC practices. So instead of talking for 20 minutes, I launched in 2 minutes and 36 seconds. I didn't tell them all the strategies that they could use. I didn't have any posters. I just said, guys, this is what you're going to do. Show me what you're thinking. Got them out into their vertical surfaces in groups of 3 with 1 marker. I was wearing a microphone and I was, running around the classroom, giving hints, giving extensions, just listening in on their conversations. And you know what? My hair was like all sweaty and I didn't look so great. I was not the rock star of that video. The kids were. And it was night and day. And I have a video of this, the difference between me talking for 20 minutes versus me only launching with 2 minutes and 36 seconds. Getting the kids out there, letting them come up with the strategies. They used every strategy I had introduced 10 years earlier, plus 3 more that I hadn't introduced. So I didn't limit their thinking. So many of those groups, they were, I didn't have to ask a lot of questions because they just started talking naturally. And so I say all that to say, oh, and the first year, like I talked for 20 minutes, the kids probably worked for 10 or 15 minutes. This last time using BTC practices, I talked for 2 minutes and 36 seconds. They were at the boards for 35 minutes. And then we consolidated. And they just kept, the extensions just kept them going. So I guess, again, in terms of how long it takes, it depends. But I really do believe that the kids engage at a deeper level and for longer periods of time when we don't do too much of the talking up front.
Yep.
Save
And
the talking
change.
for the end.
Yeah. And you're going to get better at it, right? You did 2 minutes, 36 seconds. But if you do it in 10 minutes, that's better than taking 20 minutes, right? That the way we used to do it. So remember that you're going to get better at this as you do it. So, and it was better than where you were. Remember Megan's thing about you're here on the mountain, you wish you were here, but you're here, you used to be here. So all of these things that you've learned throughout this whole book study, just try to keep in mind, write these down, come back, rewatch. Yeah, help.
It's a journey. You start with the first toolkit. Go to chapter 15 if you haven't already. You start with those first 3 practices, and then you just add one at a time. You don't have to start with everything all at once.
Yeah. And I believe, is that page 87 in the book that has the nice graphic? I saw that come up a lot this week in the book study mentioned. So in the book that we're doing the book study on too, that's a nice little graphic of like a little 1-page reminder of those, and they are grouped by those. So just a reminder to have that handy. If you don't already get the orange book, not just the green book. If you're going to do it, have all the books to help you out with it. But yeah. Yeah. And I love that somebody had in there, I was trying to look at chat as well, but just being flexibility in your teaching style with the students, but remember to give yourself grace. You're trying something new. It's not going to work perfect the first time. And you're going to get better at it as you go. So yeah. Okay. So you did mention group sizes, and this was one of the questions. So sometimes you don't have a class size that is divisible by 3, right? There's a lot of talk about having 3 in a group. So if you can't make 3 in a group, is it better to have a couple groups of 2 or to do groups of 4? What's your preference? What do you think?
No,
Is there any
that was
reason?
in the research. And so Peter would say, wouldn't it be magical if our rooms always had multiples of 3 when it comes to students? But that doesn't happen. And so he said, so if you don't have a multiple of 3 and you have an extra student, it's always better to have 2 groups of 2 rather than a group of 4. Because a group of 4 will almost always split into 2 groups of 2 or a group of 3 and a group of 1,
Yeah.
right? They don't stay cohesive. So, which was shocking to me because I was a good Kagan girl. You know, my early teaching days, I learned how to teach using Kagan cooperative learning, and that was always groups of 4. So that's another discovery I made is that when I went down to groups of 3, it was pretty magical how cohesive those groups would stay. Now, I do think that it's really important to note for our K-1, 2 teachers that they did find in the research that you can start with groups of 2 just to get them used to the routine of sharing the marker, sharing the space, sharing the thinking and talking with one another. And I think Tammy might have mentioned that 3 weeks ago when she was on here too, that, you can start with groups of 2 and gradually move into groups of 3. But the research was pretty clear that it's okay to start with groups of 2 in our lower grades.
Okay. I think I love that when you were talking about that the 4 switches into those different styles. And I think the one we see the most common is that 1 who takes control, and then the 3 that just kind of sit back, right?
Yeah,
So that's very
yeah.
common. And that's harder to do, and it's just a group of 2. So
Exactly. So yeah. So 3 is still the ideal number because you have enough diversity, right? It's sort of like when you have Swiss cheese, you know how Swiss cheese has holes in it. And if you layer 3 slices of Swiss cheese, you can get all of those holes kind of covered up because they all lean into each other's strengths.
you
And
all have been so good with these visuals that help us remember things, right? Like, how many of you are now going to be thinking about Swiss cheese every time you go to put your students into groups of 3? Just now you're going to cover all those holes. That's awesome. I love it. Okay, so another quick question about grouping here while we're on the topic. Pointers about setting up the group work areas. What materials should there be at those areas to help make sure they're working efficiently? And then how far away do you try to keep your groupings, your vertical surfaces?
really, really great question. So, first off, what materials? Now, first off, I think it's really important to note that the way that you introduce students to various tools in your classroom matters. So, I'm going to be talking here in a moment about buckets of manipulatives and visuals and things that kids can use at their thinking boards and in their thinking spaces. But I think it's also important to know that, I do a lot of work with manipulatives, and in my class, I introduce one manipulative at a time, and we build toolkits with the manipulatives and other visual tools gradually. So it's not like on the first week of school, there's a bin that has 6 different manipulatives to choose from. So I just want that to be a side note before I jump into this. But after I've gone through this process of introducing one manipulative at a time, one visual at a time, we've built these toolkits. And usually I like to use like the plastic toolboxes or the plastic shoe boxes like from Target or Walmart that have lids. And then we have baggies of manipulatives in there. Like there might be some 2-color counters and some snap cubes and some base 10 blocks. And well, you know me, I always have to have my KP10 frame tiles. So just whatever tools it is that they have access to, I think it's important for children to have choice in terms of what tools they use to help them with their thinking. So a variety of manipulatives that they've already been introduced to. It's nice to have those at the thinking boards and the tubs, since they have lids, they can be moved around, but I like to keep them in the thinking spaces. And then also, actually, I got this from Tammy in the Facebook group where when she had pictures of some of her spaces, also just having like laminated 10 frames and graph paper and coordinate grids and number lines and place value charts, some of the different tools that kids tend to use. And I just happen to have this in my suitcase. I'm in California this week, but you guys know this like the Smart Pals. I
I
love having
love
sets of
those.
these
Those
up
are,
next to
yeah.
the thinking board, so that if they in their toolkits they have like 10 frames, they can just slide that in here, or a hundreds chart, or a place value mat, right? So then this, because it's up, it's vertical, and it's non-permanent, so I can have those tools for kids to have access to in their thinking spaces as well. Oh, and I just saw
And
that
then
Jennifer had a question in here. Is it okay if I go on a little speed
absolutely.
note?
Yep.
Okay. So, oh goodness. When I'm introducing manipulatives, there's actually a blog post on the Corwin website that that explains the process I use for introducing manipulatives. But typically what I do is I'll just begin by giving the kids 5 minutes to explore the manipulative. So let's say, I mean, some of you may or may not have seen my KP10 frame tiles before, but they'll be all taken apart and the kids will just have a tub that has these in them. And I'll say to the kids, okay, y'all have 5 minutes to figure out how these work. I want you to be playful and spend 5 minutes just figuring out what you can figure out, build whatever you want to build. Then we all come back together and I have like just a piece of chart paper, an anchor chart, where we're going to just list all the ways that we were playful. So maybe we built towers and we built chocolate bars and waffles and whatever it is. So we list all the things that were playful. And then we'll say, okay, but you know what, guys? You need to know that this is actually a math tool. And sometimes we can be playful, but in math class, it's really important that we're purposeful. And the purpose of this tool is to build numbers and to think about numbers and work with them. So this is how they work. So we talk a little bit about how they work. And with this tool, I'll say we build groups of 10. So I want you to build as many groups of 10 as you can, as fast as you can. And they all go back to their tables, they take their structures apart and they build tens. And then there's a larger piece where they build the hundreds. And then we build all the way to a group of 1,000. And then we list all the ways we were purposeful. So with this tool, we now have a list of how to be playful, how to be purposeful. Playful is what you do on Fun Friday when you have some free time. If we're in on rainy day schedule, that's when you're playful, but otherwise we're purposeful. Now, here's the important idea is we do this for every manipulative. So we do this when we introduce snap cubes. We do this when we introduce two color counters. So each tool, the kids figure out how to be purposeful with them. They have a purposeful task. And then those are available to them in their groups, at their tables, at their thinking boards, and so forth. But they need to understand how to use them in meaningful ways.
And I want to say I absolutely love like that. Those last, what was that, 2-3 minutes were serious gold, Kim. Because the way that we were taught as teachers to use manipulatives was basically procedurally when our textbook tells us to use them, right? It'll say, grab the base 10 blocks, do this with it, and this with it, and this with it. There is nothing inherent in a base 10 block that tells you how to use them to solve a problem. It's just a block and then
Right.
a stick with quote unquote 10 blocks in it. But that's only what it is because we say it is, right? That could be something different. That's why we are able to use them with decimals, all that kind of stuff. So letting kids play with these I loved your two different definitions. I love it when it's alliteration also, the playfulness and then the purposeful, and helping them see the purpose behind these tools because it's not just what the textbook tells us to do with those tools. Your students need to make sense of it for themselves. And so playing with each one of those and letting them figure out, what does this thing mean? What can I do with it is so cool. I really love that. And thankfully, Tammy was on it and got the links for Kim's books and her blog post. I put in there, that you have the books to maybe remind myself to make sure we put those links in there when I'm looking through the chat again, but Tammy already grabbed them for us. So make sure you check those out. And yep, go ahead, Kim.
And there's one more place if you want to know more about manipulatives in a thinking classroom. Peter and I we co-presented a webinar for Hand to Mind back in January, and that is in their archives. So it's an hour-long webinar that he and I did specifically about using manipulatives in a thinking classroom.
Awesome. Awesome. I'm sure Tammy's on it and we'll grab it. Otherwise, we will get it in there soon. All right. So one other question with the groupings. I know we went off on a tangent with the manipulatives, which was a needed one. But about how far apart do you like to have groups in your room?
So you have to consider the size of the bodies, right? The size of your children. You want the boards to be close enough that they can mobilize knowledge, right? In the orange book that was in chapter 8, that they can look and see what's happening at other boards, have conversations with groups next to them, but far apart that they're not bumping into each other.
Mhm.
So, I mean, once again, it's pretty open-ended. It's going to be a little bit further apart if you have fifth and sixth graders, a little bit closer together if you have kindergarten and first graders. But that's the general rule of thumb, is far enough apart. And think as you're setting up your classroom, this is a really good time to be having this conversation. You want your furniture to be far enough away from the walls or where you have the boards that the kids can stand grouped in their groups of 3. And don't forget about you as the teacher. You're going to need to be able to get around from group to group. So make sure you have enough space between the wall and the furniture so that you can also easily move around without tripping over a chair or a desk leg.
Yeah. 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 So it's not really, I mean, there's not a whole lot to be concerned about mathematically or, like kids listening in on other things. It is purely the physical space, just
Yeah.
to make sure that the groups can be comfortable and you can walk around.
Yes.
That's all you got to watch out for.
Exactly. And just a side note with that whole idea of mobilizing knowledge, with our older elementary students, we help them understand that it's not cheating to look around at other boards. That can be a bit of a challenge sometimes because they've learned over the years that, when you're studenting, when you're being a good student, that you never look at somebody else's work.
Right. Absolutely. Right? How ingrained in that is us.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. But we need to help change that so they understand we're learning from each other.
We're all in this together. And we want our students to learn how to be independent, right? We want them to be autonomous. And so Peter talks about us being as intentionally less helpful as possible,
Yeah.
right? So that we want the kids to know that they can go to someone else in the classroom. They don't have to depend on the teacher or the parent or the adult in the room, that there are a lot of people that they can learn from and confirm their own work with.
Absolutely. Okay. Okay, let's switch gears a little bit and start moving towards the bigger questions here. This one's a little bit more specific. This one is about the number of questions that are in a lesson. So she said in part 3 of the book, it really lays out the amount of questions that are given each lesson, like upwards of 30. Is that the amount we need to have prepared typically? She's like, I'm a first year teacher. This is all new to me, and I'm not really a mathy, I'm not comfortable with math. It's
Mhm.
not my favorite. So she's just really concerned with the amount of questions that she feels that she's got to come up with.
Right. So I was, to be honest with, to be honest with you, I don't usually have like 30 questions for a thinking task. I don't need that many to get the kids to go from type 1, type 2, type 3 in a typical lesson. Again, it depends. So I don't know if I'm probably a little tiny square on most people's computers, but I just have some examples of, like, sometimes I just have like 3 in each type. Sometimes I have like 4 in each type. But then again, sometimes here I had like 7 or 8 in each type. So you get better. Here's a subtraction lesson where I just had 3 in each type. So sometimes you have to know your kids, your objective, where you're heading. Um, to know how many you need. The one thing that I think is helpful about what we see in the book is I don't necessarily need every group to go through every question that's in type 1. But if I do have a group that needs to hang out in type 1 a little bit longer, I have some extra ones that I've already thought of before I have them jump to type 2. So there's enough in there. You have a few extras in case you have a group or two that needs to hang out in that type a little bit longer, but not everyone has to do everything in every type. Something else to consider too is when you're doing this, this is what I'm going to be using as an example here in a little bit. Decide how far you want all of your students to get. Like when I did this lesson, we wanted to make sure that every group got to this one right here. Right. And then they just went through these, and some got all the way to type 3. But I always try to identify, okay, what's the minimum I want every group to get to during their thinking time. So do you have to have 30 every time? No. I mean, it depends on the question. I do have some that really do go that rapidly that I might want to have that many. Most of the time, as you just saw in my sketchy notes here, most of the time I don't have, I have more, I probably say more like 12 to 15, like 4 or 5 in each type.
And again, it's like everything we've been saying too. Like Kim's typically 12 to 15, but if you have like 8, that's better than, giving the kids this worksheet of 50 that they just go through and aren't even connected, right? Like we will find you're going to get there. And the more comfortable you get with it, it's going to become easier. So don't let that overwhelm stop you vote. I've got to be like this. No, you don't. Just start it.
Mhm.
It gets easier. You'll get better. Yeah.
And Kathy's comment in the chat box is really good, where she said the important thing is that as you go from one question to the next, to the next, to the next, there's not too big of a jump, right? There's just a little bit of change between each of those questions as the kids work on them. You are going to see kind of a jump as you go from a type 1 to a type 2, but then there it just increases ever so slowly. And then you're going to see a jump in the thinking when you go to type 3, but you just want to just have a little bit of variance from one to the next. That's how you really get the kids thinking productively.
Yeah. Yeah. And like everything, it just gets easier as you do it. Okay.
Hmm.
Um, so I think this kind of goes along with it too. I'm still unsure about the thin slicing on my own, but they're willing and curious, just and their comment was having patience and forgiveness with myself. So I felt like this one was what a lot of people seem to be thinking and feeling. They're unsure, but people are going to give it a try and just continue to have patience and grace with yourself. And so I wanted to put that in there too, to see if you had any more like advice, I guess, for the people who aren't totally like there's some people throughout this book study that are just like, I'm so excited. I can't wait to do this. And then there's this cautiously optimistic group that are like, this sounds cool, but I'm not so sure I can do this. So do you have some words of wisdom, I guess, to get
I
them?
do. The first thing I want to say is in this when I workshop BTC, I always try to say wherever you are in your journey is exactly where you should be.
Mhm.
So know that we are all in different places in our journeys, and you don't have to go at a certain rate or a certain pace. I loved that this person was saying she's going to give grace to herself, because you need to do that, because we all have to acknowledge that this is not how most of us learned. This is
Mhm.
not how most of us were taught, and this is not how most of us were taught to teach. So it's almost like being a brand new teacher all over again. I mean, this book came out in my 32nd year as an educator, and it was transformative for me. And I already taught using an inquiry model, and I was a very confident math teacher. And yet, 32 years in, I was almost like a new teacher again. And I was having to figure out, what does this look like, and what is the pacing, and how do I get around to all the groups? So all of us, no matter how long you've been teaching, we become first year teachers again when we start trying to implement something as transformational as building thinking classrooms. But Christina, I think this might be a good moment for me to share the example that I brought. Do you think so too?
Yep, yep. And in the comments too, I want to say this out loud and because not everybody sees these comments.
Mhm.
Um, but Tammy had put in the comments that really this thin slicing is the third toolkit. So you're not going to get to it until you've been doing some BTC stuff for a while.
Right.
So it's not where you jump in and start, right? It's it's going to take some time to get you there. So
Mhm.
hopefully you'll have some time to get comfortable with other aspects and then move
Yes.
into this. So yeah.
Yes, but and you know what? Thank you, Tammy, for saying that, because that's a really important point. And a corollary to that is that in the beginning, you don't even start with curricular tasks. And when we say curricular tasks, we mean like standards-based tasks. You start with the non-curricular tasks. You start with the game, like the puzzle-like activities, right? The how many sevens, the tax collector task. We don't start thin slicing. We don't start doing the curricular tasks till the kids have the routines down, because those fun game-like tasks are the ones that capture them and pull them in. And that's where we teach them how to get into the random groups, how to share the marker, how to share the thinking space, how to ask each other questions. And honestly, I think that's where we as teachers also learn how we're going to maintain flow, right?
Yeah.
So you don't start with the thin sliced questions. It's tempting to, because we all feel the pressure of time. We all feel the pressure of getting through out the scope and sequence and the pacing guide that's been handed to us. But
Mhm.
I promise you, going slower to go faster works in this case.
I
Start with
love
those
that mantra.
non-curriculars.
Yeah.
Say that again.
Go slow. I love that mantra. Go
Me too.
slow, and you can speed up later. So, yeah.
Yes, I often have to remind myself of that.
Yeah. Yep. So this is coming up even in the comments already. I know where Kim was going with this is let's jump in to kind of the big cloud over everybody's head is what does this actually look like? And especially when you're trying to weave it in with a curriculum that maybe you're mandated to use.
Yes. So here's what I'd like to share with you. So this is something, if you were at the Seattle conference and you saw the session that I co-presented with Chase, this was a piece that I shared there. But this is a real story. This was a group of teachers I was working with last year, and it's fifth grade. We were working on fractions, and I was going in to co-teach with a teacher. And I think there was a group of maybe 8 teachers who were going to participate in the experience. And so I had the teacher ahead of time send me the lesson, or send me the whole unit, because Peter says you don't plan a lesson at a time, you plan a unit at a time. Often you find lessons that can be combined and all of that. We'll get to that in a moment. But I took a look at the entire unit so I could see the progression of where the kids had come from, where they're heading, what are they going to be asked to do by the end, what are they supposed to know and be able to do. And then I came back to this lesson. So this lesson, if you take a look at the standard, it's situated in a chapter that's focusing on the standard of solving word problems involving addition and subtraction of fractions, referring to the same whole with all of these different conditions and nuances, right? So it's a big standard that takes us 2 or 3 or 4 weeks to teach. But then if you look over at the right-hand side where it says learning objective, this lesson, this part of that sequence is using visual models to subtract fractions that have different sized parts. So the big idea was being able to solve word problems and work with the addition and subtraction fractions. But for this one, it's the visual models, that the rigor level of this is conceptual understanding, right? And yet, when I looked ahead at what the students were being asked to do in this lesson, it was like 7 pages of word problems. And I knew that if that's what we gave to the students with this objective, we were going to lose the conceptual understanding. We weren't necessarily going to really hone in on, do they know how to sketch units that are the same sized units, and partition them into same sized pieces, and then do subtraction by comparison, not takeaway, but comparison to find a difference. So since that was the learning objective, we could see that this textbook task could diminish student thinking because the rigor level is supposed to be conceptual understanding. So before I progress, please hear me clearly. We did not eliminate working on word problems. That was something we planned for another day. But for this lesson, we really wanted to hone in on using visual models to represent subtracting fractions with different sized pieces. So what we did is, this is usually what happens in my head, right? I just wanted to make my thinking visible. So this was a think aloud. So we just took a look at what was all the math that was in this lesson. And so hear me clearly say that we did not have to come up with our own questions. We pulled them all out of the lesson that was right there in front of us. So we could see there was some prior knowledge going on because in fourth grade, we were working with same-sized pieces, right? Common denominators. There was some model work going on with rectangle models and number lines, fluency practice. There was a little RTI practice. And then the lesson, these were the word problems. We just took the math and we decided we are just going to use one context. So we chose one context we were going to focus on, but we just pulled all of these numbers out. And then this is my little warning. What I'm about to show to you, these are just the notes. They don't necessarily capture the conceptual nature of what was happening at the thinking boards. But what we did is we took those questions. What we noticed was these questions, they weren't necessarily sequenced so that they gradually became a little more difficult, right? So we resequenced them so that within each type, they gradually got a little more difficult. And then there was a jump from type 1 to type 2, and a jump from type 2 to type 3. And hopefully, as you're looking at this, you're noticing what makes type 1, what makes type 2, and what makes type 3, right? So did you notice we have common denominators, then we have compatible or friendly denominators, and then we had not compatible or unfriendly denominators, right? So that's the progression we were going to take the kids through at the thinking boards. And then underneath that, we also had to think ahead to our consolidation, right? So we were just going to have one of each type during when we brought the kids back together. They were all mixed up. And then the kids had to tell us these are the three here. Which of these is the type 1, which one's mild, which one's medium, which one's spicy when they were all mixed up. And then we solved them together to make sure everyone was doing well. And then we also had some mild, medium, and spicy questions that we pulled out of there. We ran out of questions in this lesson, so we had to pull a few from the next lesson, but together we were able to pull them all from the textbook itself. So the mild, medium, and spicy followed the same pattern as the type 1, type 2, type 3. And since all of our kids did get through the type 3, we were able to use those mild, medium, and spicy questions the way that we planned. So I just said a lot. So that's how we were thinking about how do we use that textbook to help us put together our thinking task. We pulled out the math, and again, hear me clearly say the rigor level here is conceptual understanding, not a bunch of number work. They were going to find common denominators in the next two lessons. So here's how we decided to launch. We figured all this out. We looked at where we're heading with this, and then we chose a launch. One of the word problems had been about pizza. And so the lunch was something like this. I just said, you know what, guys? My sister and I, we love a deal. We love having coupons. We love getting a good deal. And the other day, there was a pizza place in our community where we had a coupon. It was $3.99 for a pizza and a salad and a soda. We were so there. We were so excited. So we got to the pizza place and we placed our order, and I ordered pepperoni pizza. And what do you think my sister ordered? Right. And just side note, I'll bet all of you just thought of cheese, right? Almost everybody says cheese every time. I said, nope, it wasn't cheese. So I have the kids guessing. And I finally say, it was pineapple. My sister likes pineapple pizza. So we got our salads, we got our sodas. And when they brought our pizzas out, we were really surprised because our pizzas, they were shaped like rectangles. Have you ever seen rectangular shaped pizzas before? And I drew them on the board. Our pizzas were the same size, but they were rectangles. And my pizza, it was cut into 4 same-sized pieces. My sister's was cut into 8 equal-sized pieces. Now, I ate 3 of mine, so how much did I eat? Oh, yeah, I ate 3/4. And my sister, she ate 3 of hers, so how much did she eat? Oh, yeah, she ate 3/8. So who ate more? I did. So how much more? And I circled, the difference. And I said, that's what you guys are going to figure out today. Now you're going to start with 2/3 minus 1/3. I ate 2/3 of my pizza. My sister ate 1/3 of hers. You're going to draw the model. You're going to show the difference. And then you're going to show us how much more did I eat than my sister. And then we sent them out to their boards, put them into their random groups, got them out to their boards. So that was a really long example to say you don't have to come up with all these questions yourself, right? You can get all of this stuff from your textbook. I always plan the launch last. I figure out where am I going with the math first. I have to know the rigor level I'm focusing on. Am I focusing on procedural fluency? Am I focusing on conceptual understanding or context, right? So we had all of that in there. And then after the kids worked at their boards, they came back together. We had those three consolidation questions all mixed up. And they told us which one was mild, which one was medium, which one was spicy, and why. We solved them together, and then they went out and worked on their own. So, was it
So
helpful?
absolutely. One of the things, like, I mean, I'm still grabbing. I don't know if it's because of your talk with the manipulatives, but the purposeful, right? Like, I feel like textbooks just throw things in
Hmm.
there, right? And so one of the big things I took from yours was being very purposeful about pulling out things and organizing it. Like,
Hmm.
that's really kind of, I mean, that's maybe oversimplifying it, but you took what was in there, organized it into these mild, medium, spicy, thought about what the big goal was and the level of that rigor. And if you're not familiar with the types of rigor, I don't know if you caught them when Kim was talking about them, but I'll reiterate. There are times when our focus is on conceptual understanding. That's a rigor level. There's times when it's just procedural fluency. And then there are times when we need to focus on application, which is also known as the contextual story problems type situations, right? So it's honestly kind of hard to do all of those at once. And a lot of times our textbooks try to do all of them at once. And
Hmm.
so Kim was saying, like, they had that discussion of what is that focus? Are we focusing on that conceptual understanding of those visuals? If that's the case, then we got to kind of pull all the other stuff out of it and really hone in on that. So I want hopefully people to take that piece away is think about those levels. A lot of times there's a lot of them combined in one of your lessons, and that's why trying to do it all, that's I feel like is one of the things we can never do. So you're pulling out and being purposeful about what you're using in a lesson is what I took out of that. And I'd love to see in the chat too, what was somebody else, what's everybody else's takeaway from, I know this was a quick thing. I'm sure Kim could talk about this for an hour or more just on this and give us more examples, show us things. But in that quick little overview, I'm hoping that people took at least one little nugget of something of, okay, I'm going to do this with my textbook to make it fit these ideas that I've learned through the book study. But
Yeah, and I'm happy to answer follow-up questions. I mean, we only have an hour here today, and I see some good questions here in the chat box. And if people want to find me after, just email me, right? Kim at buildingthinkingclassrooms.com or Kim at kpmathematics.com or kimrimby at gmail.com. I don't care how you email me. But there was one good question in here about did they use manipulatives for this lesson? And if it would have been my classroom, yes, we would have had that. It wasn't my classroom. So on this day, that wasn't the case. But had it been a classroom where I had had a presence for a long time, the kids would have had access to physical tools. But I do want to point out that we used a rectangle model, which was what was in the lesson. And it lends itself really nicely to subtraction when you're comparing fractions. And I still had two groups of students who used circle models instead, and they were successful.
mhm.
So I think it's really important to know that there's never an insistence that you're going to use the model that we've shown you, because that turns the model into an algorithm,
Yep.
right? Whether
Yep.
it's visual or a manipulative.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Like I loved how you turned the pizza because when you started your story was like, oh, I hate pizzas for fractions, and then you turned it into that rectangular when I was like, okay, all right, I'm on board with
Try
this now,
that.
Kim. And the only reason is because it's very, very difficult to draw them the same size. That's
Mhm.
the main reason why experts kind of say save the circles for later. It's not like you can't use circles. There's circles everywhere with fractional amounts, right? But when kids are first learning to draw and compare fractions, it's really hard to get your circles the same size to compare them, and then also to get the pieces
Right.
split. It's a little bit easier when it's a rectangular format. That's the
Mhm.
only reason why. So, just in case you've never heard that before about circles not being the best. But I love that you said, hey, and here's the recovering traditionalist in me. So I'm glad Kim brought this out, is that I could see myself if I was the teacher in that situation and they started drawing circles for their pizzas, I would have been like, no, no, no. The story was rectangular pizzas, but it's not about us. It's not about the story. It's about them making sense of it. So that did like give me some heart palpitations a little bit, Kim, when you were talking about that. I was like, I don't know if I would have been okay with that, but I gotta
I
be.
redeemed myself.
Yeah. Yeah, it was good. It was good. Um, okay. Hmm. Are there any other like I'm looking through you, I don't know if you have the document up, Kim. I feel like we hit kind of those big questions overall. If there was anything else you wanted to add in there with some thoughts on that before we move to our last question.
Yeah, let me take a peek. I do have it open here. Yeah, I think I was able to kind of weave everything together. There was one though, to see a written schedule example of how to fit the essential parts of math daily lessons. I think I have something I can share for that. Is it okay if I do that
Oh
real
yeah.
quickly? Um, yeah, I'm going to share another slide. This is from the orange book. I'm pretty sure it's in the green book too. This is what
Oh
a
yeah.
lesson looks like, right? I like to call this the framework, a lesson framework. And so pretty with the launch, right? You start with the launch, and that should be 5 minutes max, right? Where you just give them as much information as they need to get started, right? No more, just as much as they need to get started. Then you have them out there working at the thinking boards during the body of the lesson. You're managing flow. And on again, that can be as little as 5 minutes, as much as 40 minutes or even more, depending on the task. And then for the closing, you have consolidation from the bottom, which is that's the kind of what I call the teaching time, right? That's when you bring them together. And consolidation is not just go look at all the boards and see what everybody did, right? Consolidation is tight with your learning objective, your learning target, your success criteria, whatever it is your program focusing on. It is tight with your standard. Right. So you have that consolidation, this conversation that gets the children ready to work independently. It's not enough just to have this collective experience during the body. You also want to shift into meaningful notes and then check your understanding questions to be able to hone in on, did I get this? And that's not for the teacher, that's for the student to see, do I really understand this? Or do I need to get a little bit of help? I can ask someone else for help during that check your understanding questions. You get to choose where you want to start. You can ask for help if you need help. And if someone asks, you should give some help. But this is sort of the general framework for a thinking lesson. And with the closing, Peter usually says there's three parts there. Choose two. You don't have to do all three of those every time.
Mhm. Yeah. And as we talked about last time, if you're not already doing notes, it's not something you have to put in there too. So, um, and yeah, I think we could probably go on and on with this, but I hope that gives people at least starting points to kind of think about ways that they can mesh the things that they are currently doing, that they're, whether it's mandated or not, or like their favorite things that they do in math time, along with BTC as they're implementing things. So I want to move into our last question, which is one that I've asked each of our guest speakers. So to wrap things up, Kim, your question now is, what are the three most difficult parts of beginning the journey into a thinking classroom?
Yes. So
And
I'm gonna
suggestions on how to overcome them. Sorry.
absolutely. So first off, I'm going to start where I just ended. I think making sure that you're staying tight with your standards, with the learning objective, with the learning outcome. Um, you want to make sure that you're looking where you want to go. And sometimes during a thinking task, it's easy to get distracted by something really cool that somebody did. And you still want to come back to being really tight with where are we heading here. You can still acknowledge and get excited about, and celebrate what's happening out there. But I used to be a competitive mountain biker. And so I have mountain biking metaphors for everything in my life. And for me, this is like going downhill on my mountain bike. Something I learned early on is look where you want to go, not where you don't want to go. Right. And so we want to make sure that we're focused on where are we heading with this, because it's really easy to get off on tangents, and that can be confusing to some of the kids if you end up spending too much time on a tangent. So be tight with your learning, with your standards and the learning objective of the lesson. Um, did I cover that well enough?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
So that was number one. Number two, I think how you start matters. How you start as it can be really overwhelming if you try to do all of this at once. And so make sure that when you first start, you focus in on that on toolkit one with having thinking tasks, using visibly randomized groups, and using vertical non-permanent surfaces. I often kind of nudge into like have a good launch also. But just start there. With mountain biking, I remember when I first learned how to mountain bike, I could only look like maybe 10 feet in front of me, right? It was important to eventually get to the point where I was also looking 30 feet in front of me, so I knew what was coming. But in the beginning, I just had to focus on what was right here in the immediate for now. And I eventually got better and better about looking further down the trail to see what was coming soon. But to get started, it's okay just to stay focused on those smaller pieces. The rest will come. Like Tammy put in there earlier, some of the tools that we've talked about today, some of the practices aren't till toolkit 3.
Mhm.
So just start small and look right in front of you for now. You'll get there with practice, right? Give yourself grace.
Yeah. Really well.
And then the third thing, mm, classroom management. I get those questions a lot, even when I come back like 2 or 3 times later. And I would say what you want to do is number one, just know BTC is not a silver bullet for all the classroom management issues you have going on in your classroom, right? You have those 2 or 3 kids that you have to work with, and that's going to be true if they're sitting at desks or if they're up at boards, right? Don't get distracted and start thinking it's all of the kids. It's still the 2 or 3, and you still need to work with them and do the same kind of modification plans that you would do anyway. Um, and prevention is the best thing we can do. Making sure you hone in on those routines, right? Making sure that upfront you're doing those 3 to 5 non-curricular tasks, maybe even 6 or 7, depending on your class. Making sure that they know how to get into their random groups, how to share a marker, how to interact with their group of 3. If you're a K-1 teacher, starting with the group of 2 and shifting into group of 3. Um, that's for the kids as well as for us, right? We as teachers also need to figure out what we want those routines to look like. But I remember when I was a brand new first year teacher, it was right before the first day of school. I had a mentor who made me sit down and write out every procedure and routine I was going to have for everything that was happening in my classroom. Um, that has always stuck with me. So I've always been kind of systems based because she got me started off on such a good routine with that. That's what we want to do with building thinking classrooms also. Think about those routines. How are you going to get the kids from their chairs to your standing launch? How are you going to get the kids from the standing launch to their thinking boards in their random groups? How are you going to ensure that they're sharing the marker? Right. Those are some of the basic things. And that's why we start with the non-curricular tasks to
Mhm.
get those routines in place. And then you have the buy-in when we start shifting into the curricular tasks that really take up 95% of our lessons. Most of the time, most of the year, we're going to do standards-based curricular lessons.
Yeah. And those three are gold that I hope have helped. Like that original question was asked by a math coach of like kind of what should I watch out for and how can I help my teachers, to be prepared and notice these things. Um, but I think that this was really great to end with too, of three really key things to keep in mind as you're moving forward, because it is easy to, now that we've completed this book study, to think about everything that is involved in BTC, which is really overwhelming. But keep in mind to just look at that 10 feet in front of you, keep that first toolkit in mind, and then you'll be able to go out further and further and get those routines down with your students, get the classroom management set up ahead of time, just like everything that is all those things that we learned as teachers. It's just a different type of classroom management than what it was. It's not keeping them quiet in their seats doing the worksheet. It's, helping them learn how to discuss with each other and be mindful of the other people and learn from each other and all of those kinds of things that we have to spend time helping them learn how to do it, just like we help them learn how to walk in a straight line when they first come to kindergarten in the hallway, right? So it's just different routines, but take the time to really build it because otherwise it will show up later that you didn't get that opportunity with those kids. So Kim, thank you so very much, not just for today, but for everything that you've been doing with a part of this book study. It has not gone unnoticed. Tammy, thank you for being in here today in the chat and being our Kim in the chat, right? So thank you so much, everybody who has stuck around for 4 weeks of this book study. That's kind of how it goes. Like we'll have hundreds at the first session, and then now we're down to like 60 some tonight. So you guys are the rock stars. And thank you so much for being here. I know it's hard to be here when it's live. So I know we have tons who will watch it later. But thank you all for being here live, getting this information. And just know it'll be on YouTube. You can share it out, come back and rewatch. So thank you all. Thank you very much, Kim, of course. So thank you. Good luck implementing.